So you now have gotten the samples, you've gone back and forth with the factory, you've confirmed them, you've talked to them about terms and everything confirmed in terms of when it will be in production, sorted out logistics and everything. You now need to think about the total cost. One big mistake that a first time founder might have is thinking that the FOB cost equals the total cost of your product, or even the landed cost is the total cost of your product. But you also need to think about the various other costs, such as the storage costs, if your product doesn't sell as fast as you'd like it to sell, and different delivery costs and also return costs should be all factored into your consideration when you're calculating your margins or figuring out what the actual total cost of your product is for you to be able to start selling it to the end consumer. Hi, my name is Ivan, and no, we've been doing supply chain for and sourcing for the past 30 years or so. And I talk about footwear sourcing, or just sourcing in general, and looking at factories and whatnot. So if you're interested, maybe you're a first time founder, or you're thinking of becoming a founder of your own brand, whether it be footwear, maybe it's clothing or whatnot, then please leave a comment below if you have any questions, and like and share and subscribe. Thank you. Today we're going to talk about three things in general. First is looking at the HS code, and that's a harmonized code in customs. Now, this is mainly for the US, but going to other countries, there'll probably be a similar system. It might be just a slightly different coding system, but it'll be mainly the same because it's globally. It's the basics are the same. And talking about freight forwarders versus some standard carriers. Now, are you going to let the factories handle all the logistics, or should you look for a third party logistics provider to handle all the logistics? And the last thing is about landed costs. So, again, going back to what I was saying about what is the actual total cost of your product, it does need to include everything from the logistics of getting it to the country that you're selling it to, and also storage, and there's also maybe different like customs clearance costs and all that you need to consider when you're looking at the total cost of your product. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the HS code. So why are we talking about HS codes, and what is the HS code? HS code is the code, or the identification number that the customs of your destination country they give to certain products, and normally it's very very specific. So it depends on the specific product. Like for footwear, there's footwear in terms of leather, is it made from rubber, and how much percentage of leather, how much percentage. So it's a really long list. And your customs agent or your customs clearance provider will probably ask you or work with you to figure it out, or the factory that produces it might also, if they have experience, they will you can consult them about this. But why is it important? It's because normally that is the basis of how they will tax or take a tariff on your product, is based on the categorization it is in. Now, some products might carry heavier tariffs or taxes than others, and even some products, depending on the different material, might have different categories of tariffs and tax, and that's why you need to make sure that it's correct. And the reason why we're talking about it is also that it's a potential easy save of money. We've seen cases where the clients are, maybe they don't know how to do it, and they've ask the factory to do it for them or whatnot. And factory is also not always the most professional in terms of customs clearance, because they may not keep up with the updated kind of tariff HS codes or systems, as these sometimes can change. So they maybe get the wrong one, and it's a bit more expensive. So we've seen cases where just by looking at the HS code and getting it correct, or figuring out, okay, if my product falls, sometimes there's products that can fall under different categories, and they're all correct in some way, and that you can figure out that, okay, perhaps by making the category more specific or correct, then you can actually save anywhere between 5 to 20% just on the taxes or tariffs of your specific product. So it's worth looking into whether you want to look for by yourself. But of course, going to a professional customs clearance agency or an agent or some company that has done it, that specific products that you do, would be the best case. So I wouldn't recommend just generically looking for a customs clearance agent or company, but you should look for one that has done and has a lot of experience in your specific product. So, going back to footwear, we the customs agents we use have dealt with a lot of footwear. They may also help brands like large US retailers, that have done, like Walmart, TJ Maxx's, and whatnot, or factories that serve these customers. So they're well aware of the different types of shoes and have that experience. So when you go to them, they know, okay, these are the types of HS codes, that this specific product might fall under, and they can figure things out for you and kind of discuss with you on that. So second, freight forwarders versus standard carriers. So I know that a lot of first time founders, or not even first time founders, a lot of brands do this, that they go to a factory and maybe you want to let them handle the shipping, whether it's CIF or DDP terms, and you let them do all of that and just quote you one price, because maybe you don't want to handle it, you don't have the experience, or any other reason, and you're okay with that. While that's totally valid, whatever reason it is, and you choose, you should have in mind that you may at some point in time want to look for a third party freight forwarder or logistics provider to also quote you the price for that. And even if you're a first time founder, and let's say you're talking to a factory and you're about to kind of place an order, you want to know about logistics costs, I still think that you should talk to a third party freight forwarder just to know the market, know what the costs are. And it's also, of course, that a lot of the factories going back, they will, have their own logistics company that they work with, and that's how they probably quote your CIF or DDP orders. But the factory, of course, is not the most professional when it comes to overseas logistics, custom clearance, or whatnot. So when you do CIF or DDP, what happens is the factory basically acts as your account manager, if you will, and they will talk to the logistics and customs clearance companies to get your products to where they say they'll deliver it, which is fine. But then it goes through that extra layer, if you will, where where if they're not experienced, perhaps in exporting to your country, that's when you could sometimes run into problems. But of course, if that factory has done a lot of exporting to your country, then normally it's fine. But the other thing, of course, is you will expect higher fees, because normally the factory will take, or pad a bit of fees in there, because they're helping you manage that logistics process, as well as customs clearance process, taking care of paperwork and giving it to the customs clearance agents and discussing with them if needed. So it might be worthwhile to go and talk to a third party freight forwarder, and you work with them directly on that. One is the cost might come down, and they're able to discuss with you ways to help you do it more efficiently, or maybe various ways, again going back to things like HS code and what, to figure out, oh, there's further savings potentially possible. So that's one way that you can look at it, and also you will get a better sense of the whole market in terms of the logistics rates, customs clearance. Every process may have a cost, and you should know those costs, because then going into the third part we're going to talk about is how are you going to think about and calculate the actual total cost of your product before you sell to the customer. Now, the last thing we want to talk about is the landed cost. So when you're thinking of selling the product, and you're going to launch your marketing or your website, or however you're going to sell your product, of course the one of the first things that we need to know is the price. Now, how much am I going to sell it for? And sometimes you want to base it on the costs, or sometimes you just want to base it on other things. Whatever it is that you want to base it on, then the cost must definitely play a factor, right? And so understanding your actual cost is very important, so you later on will know, well, the price that I want to sell it for, is it actually feasible to sell it for that? Do I actually make enough money? Or is it going to be much harder to sell at a specific price, because maybe your competitors sell very similar products but at a much lower price? So you need to figure those things out. And what I talk about is a lot of the founders and even some that I meet who are, first just thinking about their brand and are new to this, think that the FOB cost of the product is the actual cost that they are going to reference or use as the actual total cost of their product. And that's wrong because there are a lot more costs after FOB that needs to be involved. So, for example, would be like freight forwarding, port handling costs, custom duties, customs clearance, agent fees, local trucking, or storage at the local destination, especially if when your products might take a while to sell. If you order, let's say, 2,000 of them, they might not sell in one day. So that will mean there will be storage costs. Let's say you store it in your own home. If your product allows that, then you don't have those costs. Fair. But then there will be things like, for example, delivery costs to your customer. And then one other thing that a lot of founders neglect is return fees. You probably want to figure out use some data to figure out what is the average return rate for a product in your industry. So, for example, let's say shoes could be anywhere between, let's say, 15 to 30% is pretty normal. Then I need to factor that into my calculation of the actual price of the products so that I will pad in enough margin so that when the 30% or whatever amount you want to use, 15 to 30% is factored in there so that when a return happens, then, it doesn't eat that much into your margin. You still obtain healthy margins and it's still a profitable business. So a lot of founders sometimes neglect that and either they sell it for too cheap and things happen and for example the units don't sell as fast as they wanted to or returns happen more often than they actually thought, then it eats into your margin and a potentially profitable product on paper might become very not profitable or even very costly for them. So thank you very much. And please like, share, and subscribe, and leave any questions in the comments below. Or if there's anything else you want me to talk about, then leave a comment below. Thank you.